My wife insisted we have separate bank accounts after marriage. When I lost my job, she refused to help with bills, saying, "Your problems aren't mine." Last week, she got laid off. I smiled as she screamed, "We're supposed to be a team." I replied, "Your problems aren't mine." I, 33M, have been married to my wife, 31F, for 4 years, together for 6. When we first got engaged, we had the typical discussions about finances. I suggested combining our accounts after marriage. Nothing crazy, just a joint account for shared expenses while keeping smaller individual accounts for personal spending. She immediately shot this down. "I believe in financial independence," she said. "My money is my money, your money is yours." Looking back, I should have seen this as a red flag, but I was in love and thought we could make it work. We agreed on a system where we'd split all bills proportional to our income. I worked in marketing making about $65K, while she was in sales making around $85K. She insisted on separate accounts for everything, separate savings, separate credit cards, separate investments. We even had a spreadsheet to track who paid for what. Dinners out, logged in the spreadsheet. Groceries, tracked to the penny. This system worked until last year when my company went through layoffs and I lost my job. The economy was rough, and despite applying to dozens of positions daily, interviews were scarce. My emergency savings were being depleted rapidly. When I approached my wife about temporarily adjusting our bill-splitting arrangement, her response shocked me. "Your job problems aren't my problems," she said. "I'm not touching my savings because you can't find work." I reminded her of our vows for better or worse, in sickness and in health. Her response? "That's just ceremonial stuff. Real life doesn't work that way." For 3 months, I struggled to pay my portion of the bills. I picked up gig work, sold possessions, and cut every possible expense. Meanwhile, my wife continued her regular shopping habits, weekend brunches with friends, and even took a self-care weekend trip to a spa resort. When I mentioned how her weekend getaway cost what would cover 2 months of my portion of the utilities, she actually said, "Maybe that'll motivate you to find a job faster." Her parents started calling me, suggesting I wasn't trying hard enough. My mother-in-law even sent me links to job postings that were completely outside my field or experience level, then got offended when I explained why they weren't suitable. My breaking point came when I overheard my wife on the phone with her sister. "I don't know why he's struggling so much. It's not like marketing jobs are hard to find. I think he's just getting comfortable letting me carry more weight." This was rich coming from someone who refused to carry anything of mine. I kept applying and finally landed a position at a smaller agency. The pay was less than my previous job, about $55K, but was stable employment. Throughout this entire ordeal, my wife never once offered to help with my share of expenses, even temporarily. Fast forward to last week. My wife came home in tears. Her company had undergone restructuring, and her entire department was eliminated. She was given a severance package of 2 months' salary, but in her field, jobs were even scarcer than in mine. That evening, she sat me down and said we needed to discuss finances. She proposed that while she's in transition, we should temporarily combine resources, and she would pay back her portion once she found new employment. I looked at her for a long moment before responding, "Your job problems aren't my problems." She looked completely shocked, then immediately started yelling about how we're married, we're supposed to be a team, and how I was being vindictive. I simply reminded her of her own words from months earlier. "That's just ceremonial stuff. Real life doesn't work that way." She stormed out and returned an hour later with her mother in tow. My mother-in-law berated me for not supporting my wife during a difficult time, calling me selfish and petty. I remained calm and asked where this support was when I was struggling. "That was different," my mother-in-law insisted. "My daughter has always been responsible with money. Your situation was your own fault." I told them both that my decision was final. My wife could continue paying her portion of our expenses from her savings and severance, just as I had done during my unemployment. After all, she had more in savings than I did, since she earned more. It's been 5 days. My wife has barely spoken to me, except to call me heartless. Her mother keeps sending me texts about how a real man would support his wife. Meanwhile, her father, who has been surprisingly quiet until now, called me yesterday. I expected more of the same, but instead he just said, "She's just like her mother. They never think rules apply to them." I don't think our marriage will survive this, but honestly, I'm not sure I want to anymore. Update. Wow, I didn't expect this to get much attention. Thanks for all the comments. Things have gotten worse in the past week. My wife has gone from barely speaking to me to telling all our mutual friends that I'm financially abusing her during her time of need. Half of them have sent me concerned messages or called to check in. When I explain the full story with the context of what happened during my unemployment, most of them get quiet or change the subject. One friend, who is closer to my wife than to me, actually apologized after hearing my side. Apparently, my wife had told her I was someone who had always insisted on separate finances, completely backwards from reality, and was now using her job loss as revenge. I've started keeping notes of our conversations after this. I've been doing it casually since my own unemployment when she'd say stuff that seemed off, but now I'm being more thorough about it. Not detailed records or anything, just jotting down dates and what was said, especially after she tried twisting things with our friends. My wife's shopping habits haven't changed despite her unemployment. Yesterday, she came home with several bags from expensive stores. When I raised an eyebrow, she snapped, "I'm using MY money that I saved, unlike some people." Last night, we had what I thought might be a breakthrough. She sat down and acknowledged that she had been unsupportive during my unemployment. For a moment, I thought we might actually have a productive conversation. Then she followed it up with, "But you have to understand, when you lost your job, your entire company was downsizing. When I lost mine, they specifically targeted my department. It's completely different." I asked how that made any practical difference to our situation. Her response? "My job loss was unfair. Yours was just business." I've scheduled a consultation with a divorce attorney next week. Not rushing into anything, but I want to know where I stand. The most revealing moment came 2 days ago when her mother organized a family meeting at our home without asking me first. She arrived with my wife's father and sister, apparently planning to convince me to do the right thing. What they didn't count on was my brother-in-law, wife's sister's husband, actually taking my side. He pointed out that the financial arrangement had been my wife's idea from the beginning, and that applying the same rules to both of us wasn't unfair. My mother-in-law actually said, "Men and women are different. A husband should provide for his wife in times of need." To which my brother-in-law replied, "So gender equality only applies when it benefits women?" The room went quiet. My father-in-law looked down at his hands. Meeting over, no resolution. I've noticed my wife's been on her phone more than usual lately, and I've caught her hanging up calls when I walk into the room. I'm not snooping, but it's hard not to notice. I've also seen some past due notices in the mail for her credit card, which is weird since she always talked about how responsible she was with money. I've got a feeling there's more going on here than I know. I'll update again after I've spoken with the attorney. In the meantime, I'm sticking to our separate finances arrangement exactly as my wife designed it. Her portion of next month's bills will be due in 2 weeks. Update 2. It's been a little over 2 weeks since my last update. Some stuff has cleared up while other things have gotten more complicated. I met with the divorce attorney, who was pretty straightforward. Since we've kept separate finances, and we've only been married 4 years, things should be relatively simple. We don't own a house, we rent, and don't have kids, so that helps. The attorney suggested I continue keeping notes of our interactions, which I've been doing more consistently now. My wife's bill payment deadline came and went. She made no attempt to pay her portion. When I reminded her, she just gave me a look and said, "I'm good for it." 3 days passed with nothing. I finally texted her that if she didn't pay her portion by the end of the week, I would only pay my share of the rent and utilities. This set her off. She called me from her friend's house and started yelling that I was trying to ruin her credit and make her homeless. I reminded her that these were the exact same risks I faced during my unemployment that she didn't care about. "But I will pay you back once I find a job," she yelled. "You're just being petty now." I said I had also planned to pay back any help she might have offered during my unemployment, but that opportunity never happened because she refused. She called me an asshole and hung up. Something interesting happened the next day. My wife's best friend, someone who has known her since college, messaged me. I was surprised since she and my wife are really close. She told me this wasn't the first time my wife had been weird about money. Apparently, in their old apartment, my wife would use her roommate's groceries but guard her own. She would calculate utilities to the penny but forget to count extra when she had guests over who used more water or electricity. When called out, she would either get defensive or act like a victim. Her friend also mentioned something that threw me. According to her, my wife had talked to a divorce attorney months ago, when I was unemployed. She had apparently been looking at her options back then, despite acting like everything was fine. About a week after our phone fight, I noticed a missing payment alert for her car. This wasn't the first one. Apparently, she'd been late on payments for a couple months, but had hidden the notices. I found one stuffed in a drawer when I was looking for scissors. So much for her superior financial responsibility she'd been holding over my head. My wife finally paid her portion of the bills yesterday, but sent a text calling me financially abusive and controlling. I just sent back screenshots of her own messages from when I was unemployed, where she had said almost the exact same things to me. Instead of acknowledging the double standard, she wrote, "The difference is that I needed you to be strong then. I needed to know you could handle problems. Now I need your support. Different times, different needs." I've decided to file for divorce next week. Our lease is up in 3 months, which gives us both time to find new places. I've already started apartment hunting. Her family is split. Her mother and sister still think I'm the bad guy. Her father, though, called me yesterday and just said, "You're seeing what I've dealt with for 35 years. Then he changed the subject. "I'll post once more after I've filed, and we've started separating. Thanks for letting me vent about this mess." Final update. It's been 2 months since my last update, and I'm writing this from my new apartment. The divorce is moving along, though it's been messy. After I filed, my wife went through a bunch of reactions, sometimes all in the same day. First, she told me I was just doing this for attention and would regret throwing everything away. Then came angry texts and calls, switching between calling me names and accusing me of things I never did. Then she suddenly wanted to work things out, suggested joint accounts, couples therapy, even said we should start from scratch with a new financial system. When she realized I was serious, she showed up at my workplace crying. My supervisor had to step in, which led to an uncomfortable conversation with my boss later. He was pretty cool about it once I explained what was happening, though. Now she's telling everyone she outgrew the relationship and how she tried to make it work with someone who had different values. She's completely rewriting what happened. I've learned some interesting things during this process. Those late car payments I mentioned in my last update, turns out they weren't just a couple months behind. She was on the verge of repossession. Her credit score, which she always bragged about, is actually worse than mine. And those substantial savings she claimed to have? Much smaller than she led me to believe. My soon-to-be ex-father-in-law has been checking in occasionally. He told me he's been living with similar one-sided rules for decades. "I should have gotten out years ago," he said during one conversation. "Don't end up like me." One messed up thing happened during the financial disclosure process. My wife had been telling her attorney I was hiding money and had controlled our finances throughout the marriage. When we presented the actual paper trail of our separate accounts, which SHE had insisted on and documented herself, her attorney's attitude changed completely. The next settlement discussion was much more reasonable. My wife found a job last month, not as good as her previous one, but it's employment. She immediately tried to use this to slow down the divorce, saying her new financial situation should be considered instead of her unemployment. My attorney pointed out that if my unemployment didn't matter to our finances according to her own rules, then her new job shouldn't matter to our divorce. I got a small promotion at work, nothing huge, but the extra money helps with the apartment I found. It's smaller than our old place, but affordable. I've started hanging out with friends I hadn't seen much during my marriage, including an old roommate who went through something similar with his ex. I ran into my wife's best friend at the grocery store last week. She mentioned my wife's been telling people she left me because I couldn't manage money. I started to get annoyed about this, but her friend cut me off. "Most people know that's not what happened," she said. "Anyone who's been around you too can see through it." That actually made me feel better than I expected. I've learned that you really see who someone is during hard times, not when everything's going well. My wife showed her true colors during both our crises, mine and hers. The double standards were just too much to ignore. The divorce should be final in another month or 2. Some days are harder than others, and it's definitely not the clean break I was hoping for. I'm still finding her stuff mixed in with mine, and occasionally get angry texts when she remembers something else to blame me for. Her mother still sends messages about how I've ruined her daughter's life, which I've started just ignoring. But overall, I'm doing okay. Better than I expected, actually. Sometimes standing up for yourself feels worse before it feels better.